Welcome! My name is Caroline Herbert, Instructional Design Manager, and I want to thank you for tuning in to this recording of the Foundation Center's Basic Introduction to Fundraising Planning. Today we'll be talking about the basic steps for developing a fundraising plan. Although we won't be able to cover every aspect of your fundraising strategy today, we hope this class will get you started in the right direction and lead to more in-depth conversations with the staff and board of your organization about your fundraising needs and strategies. So what exactly is a fundraising plan? A fundraising plan is a living document which lays out specific fundraising tasks and strategies, including who will be responsible for completing them, and the time frame of when they need to be accomplished. Ultimately, a successful fundraising plan can help an organization be proactive rather than reactive in your fundraising. Many times we as nonprofits have fundraising crises, and we've all been there when we are struggling to meet our programmatic and fundraising goals. A fundraising plan is a roadmap that will help you get from where you are to where you want to be. So why is it important? Planning is a critical activity for your organization's success. Planning focuses your organization by setting fundraising priorities and helps give your staff, board, and volunteers an understanding of the big picture, the organization's funding needs, and how you plan to meet those needs. It is the whole staff's responsibility to understand the plan and their role in the process. Fundraising is definitely a team sport. Board involvement is critical to fundraising success. Having an agreed-upon plan strengthens board commitment and involvement in reaching your fundraising goals. And finally, a diversified fundraising plan prevents organizations from becoming over-dependent on one source. Most fundraising plans fall into a fiscal year or calendar year and take months to put together. This is not something one person sits down and writes in an hour. Although the development director or fundraiser may draft the plan, it is critical that your board and senior staff have ownership in your fundraising plan. Keep in mind that your plan should be formulated and approved several months prior to the beginning of your fiscal or calendar year. So how does an organization start a fundraising plan? We've laid out 6 steps for the fundraising planning process. They are: identify your assets, develop a case statement, set your goals, create an action plan, implement your plan, and evaluate your plan. We're going to be talking about each one of these steps in more detail. But before we start, I want to take a moment to show you 2 important pie charts. The first one breaks down all the types of nonprofit revenue. When we think about the nonprofit sector as a whole and look at how nonprofits are supported, fees for services, earned income is the largest category of revenue. An example is colleges charging tuition. Institutional grant makers, like foundations, fit into the private contributions category, the purple part of the pie, which includes foundations as well as corporations and individual donors. This next chart takes the purple part of the previous pie chart and breaks it down further. So this is just the private contributions by source for nonprofits in the U.S. You can see that, despite what most people may assume, foundations and corporations together account for only a modest proportion of charitable giving. This is a common myth. The vast majority of private giving comes from individuals, people like you and me. So why is this pie chart important to fundraising planning? My hope is that it will help you realize that the bulk of your support is not going to come from foundations. In order to reduce your dependency on any one funding source, you need to diversify your funding streams. And we'll be talking about that in more detail. But let's get back to the 6 steps and start with number 1, identify your assets. Here, you're going to want to ask yourself, what are my current organizational strengths? What makes my organization appealing to potential funders? Here's some examples. Compelling mission, large public base of support, name recognition, well-connected staff and board, great facility, high traffic website. A good way to access your strengths and weaknesses is by conducting a SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Conducting a SWOT analysis will not only help you identify your strengths, or what you do well, but also help you identify where you might need additional funding or where your weaknesses or threats are, which can turn into funding opportunities. Knowing your strengths will also help you with your case statement. Your case statement is a written document outlining the general argument for why your organization deserves support. Typical case statements for small to medium-sized nonprofits are 5 to 10 pages long. A case statement lays out the most basic facts about an organization and should include mission and values, programs and services, accomplishments, plans for the future, and budget needs. Preparing your organization's case statement is also an opportunity to collect data that demonstrates your competencies and the effectiveness of your work. Ultimately, you can use your case statement as a core communication tool. It gets everyone on the same page and can be used in writing proposals, speeches, press releases, etc. Number 3, set your goals. Who are your current funding partners? You should begin by taking a look at your current funding situation and make sure you have a clear understanding of where your support is coming from. If you're a new organization, your list of current funders might only be your friends, family, and board members, and that's okay. Every organization starts somewhere. Who are your largest funders? What sources generate the largest revenue? For some organizations, this might be government support. For others, as we saw from the pie chart in the beginning of class, it may be individuals. Where could you strengthen your funding base? What funders may be able to increase their level of support? Your current funders have the greatest potential for growth because they already know about your work and support your organization. So it's important to think about how you can not only maintain their current level of support, but grow and steward these relationships to pave the way for increased funding. Now that you know where you are, you can determine where you need to go and how to get there. Earlier, I mentioned the importance of a diversified funding base. This means not putting all your eggs in one basket. Instead, you want to put your eggs in many different baskets. Think about this river as your organization, with all these little streams feeding into the river. Implementing different fundraising strategies lessens the possibility of the river drying out if the flow from one income source begins to slow down or is suddenly eliminated. So, for example, if your organization only receives government support and the government support ends, what will happen to your organization? Just as we saw from the pie chart at the beginning of class, foundations are only one current or potential revenue stream. Here's just a sample of what your organization's streams may be: foundation grants, government funding, or individual donors. Each organization is different, so your revenue streams will be different, and we could also add things like earned income and corporations. So the key takeaway here is that a strong river means a strong organization. The more diverse your funding sources, the more stable your organization will be. So as you continue to think about how diverse your organization's funding streams are, you'll want to determine which funders could provide you with the most long-term security. What sources are most reliable? Consider how likely they'll be to renew or increase their support over time. Which additional funders or streams might you be able to add to your funding mix? Who could be funding your organization but isn't? Consider all the possible sources or streams and determine what is feasible for your organization based on your mission, geographic region, and population served. Think through your programs and services and how they affect the larger community. For example, if your organization runs an after-school program for teens, who in the community might be affected by this program and may be interested in supporting it? Teachers and parents, small business owners, municipalities, or maybe other community organizations. How much time and money will it take to secure additional funding partners? Be realistic. Evaluate the revenue potential, cost, and time it will take to pursue and secure new funding streams. This should help you determine where to focus your efforts. Number 4, create an action plan. A fundraising action plan sounds more daunting than it actually is. This is where you set a goal for each revenue strategy or stream. Think through the details: who, when, what, where, and how. Create a chart, timetable, or narrative description outlining the details. So here's an example. Let's say our goal is to raise $60,000 in foundation grants by the end of the calendar year. Starting at the beginning of the year, the first task is for the development staff. They're going to research potential prospects using the Foundation Director online, and this work will take place in January and February. Based on our research, we'll need to determine how many possible prospects we have to approach and the appropriate ask amount. Based on our research, we can determine if the grant maker has supported similar organizations and/or similar programs, to whom and for how much. Then we know how much to ask for from each prospect. Based on that research, we can determine whether a realistic goal is to obtain some combination of 2 grants at $30,000, 3 grants at $20,000, 5 grants at $12,000, or 6 grants at $10,000. Note that to reach that goal, you'll probably need to approach at least 3 times as many funders. Why? We estimate 1 out of 3 proposals are funded, so you're often asking for more than you need, knowing that the majority will say no. Now, I know we're just talking about an example here, but as you're coming up with these goals, you need to make sure your organization has the time and capacity to do what you say you're going to do. It might not be feasible to submit 12 proposals in 4 months. Keep in mind, you're also working with funders' deadlines and timelines. Next, the board and staff will review the list of prospects in the hopes of finding a connection to get a foot in the door. We'll want to complete this task by March. Number 5, implement your plan. Next, you'll implement your action plan and check in regularly at board and staff meetings to make sure you're on track. Your fundraising plan isn't something you create and then never look at again. It's a living document. You can and should revise and adjust it along the way as you begin to see what's working and what's not. Which brings us to number 6, evaluate your plan. So how will you know if your plan is successful? And most importantly, was the money raised worth the expenditure of time and effort? This lays the groundwork for next year's plan. Sometimes the answer will be yes, and sometimes you'll want to try something else or eliminate something that didn't work so well. Looking back at our sample, we'll want to add reviewing our pending and confirmed requests to make sure we're on track. We're going to want to do this in June. So we have a full 6 months to revise our strategy if needed and maybe get a few more proposals out. And revise the plan as necessary based on the results. We're about ready to wrap up, so here are our 6 steps again. And the key takeaways from today: know where you're starting and where you need to go. What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Diversify your funding streams. Your strongest supporters this year might not be your strongest supporters next year. Who do you need in your funding mix that will keep your river flowing? Set realistic goals. Make sure your plan is applicable and appropriate for your organization and is actually achievable. Evaluate your plan and revise as needed. Check in regularly. Monitor your success. It doesn't have to be perfect at the beginning because you're going to learn things about your organization. So be flexible and make changes as necessary. Build upon your success and learn from your weaknesses. That concludes the Introduction to Fundraising Planning class recording. Before we finish, I have some free resources to introduce to you on our grantspace.org website, a key source of information for nonprofits. You'll find many skill areas covered here, including fundraising. On the skill pages, you'll find related videos, trainings, and more, including FAQs under Get Answers. Click on More to go to the knowledge base. Let's look at the fundraising planning category. One of the most helpful questions here is on the case for support. Lastly, let's see where you can find the Foundation Center in your community. One of the tools available in the pull-down menu is Find Us. This is where you can look up the nearest location of a funding information center. It is through our network of funding information centers that you can access our funding database, Foundation Directory Online, free of charge. This is a key tool for researching potential grant makers, as we mentioned in our example. We encourage you to explore more Foundation Center resources and training, and thank you for watching this recording.